Welcome, everyone, to the latest edition of Couch Potato Theater here on the Fandom Podcast Network. We are having a ton of fun today because we are continuing our Canon Films retrospective. But at this point, you should have joined us for American Ninja 1 and 2. And today we've got a great one. We are covering the classic Chuck Norris, Louis Gossett Jr. film, Firewalker. And you know what, guys? I've got to have expert treasure hunters with me for this. I can do the karate, but I'm horrible with a gun. I'm not real great with a map either. So I'm going to bring in the man who helped develop the Fandom Podcast Network, our co-founder around here. And he's coming from a long way because he has been hunting treasure in a land down under. And that is, of course, the one and only Mr. Kevin Reitzel.
What's going on? Yeah, I'm not in my cool California studios right now. I'm actually in Melbourne, Australia. This is fun.
Yeah. I'm just beware of Cyclops. That's all I'm saying. Okay. By the end of this podcast, who knows what's going to happen? But
it's true. Yes. Well, hold on. You do know that Chuck Norris is the only one that can hit a Cyclops between the eye.
Well, yeah, exactly. Lots of ricochets with that too. So.
Yes.
But guys, you know what? It is Couch Potato Theater. This is our Canon Films retrospective, and you know what? This film was not chosen by Kevin or I. Oh, no. This film was chosen by the one and only queen of movie foo, the one and only Miss Lacey Adderholt.
Hello.
Well, welcome to this special edition Couch Potato Theater, Lacey. It's always great to have you here with us, whether we're Couch Potato Theater, Time Warp, Culture Clash, whatever. And it is so fun doing this Canon Films retrospective. But Kevin, I was thinking about this. We are talking Canon Films, which means we are talking 1980 films classic. And we got a guy that floats around this network every once in a while. Sometimes his head's a little shiny. Sometimes it's a little mulleted. It is the one and only Lethal Mullet himself. And he is joining us for this particular podcast because we might even be doing a little mullet crossover with this movie before it's all said and done. He is the one and only Lethal Mullet, Mr. Adam O'Brien.
Hey, going, fellas and all. I'll tell you what, this is going to be one amazing cast. Looking at a film which I think is a little bit different. And Lacey, you picked an amazing one when it comes to, I think, one of the big ones, which is not just a Chuck Norris kickfest. This is Indiana Jones. This is adventure. We've got a really good actor in the middle of his, I think his prime, personally, Louis Gossett Jr., just done An Officer and a Gentleman. He's really up there. But with Chuck Norris, and this is pushing Chuck Norris's acting skills plus comedy, like you can't do better, can you? I think this one.
Yeah, this is nice Chuck Norris. This is funny, cracking jokes, and also can't hit anything with a gun. Chuck Norris.
He went to stormtrooper school for this particular film. But guys, before we dive any further into Firewalker, let's talk about what's happening around the Fandom Podcast Network, specifically Couch Potato Theater, because yes, this summer we are diving into our retrospective of Canon Films. And at the time you're seeing this, if you haven't yet, go back on YouTube, go back on our audio feeds. We did our first ever double feature Couch Potato Theater. This is how big this Canon Films thing is, because Kevin, not only did we cover American Ninja 1, we covered American Ninja 2, The Confrontation.
Yeah, which is a really fun double feature. You got to watch these back to back. And when I originally watched it, when I mentioned on the show, I watched 2 first and went back and watched 1. And these just pair well together, and they are such cult classics and a major representation of what Canon Films was like back in the 80s. Thus, we had to start the 80s Canon Films retrospective with these 2.
Exactly. But you know what? Canon Films was such a big part of the 1980s. There's more than one Canon film we got to touch for this retrospective. And of course, tonight we are doing Firewalker, but we've got some other classic examples of Canon films that we're going to be discussing through this retrospective. Not only are we talking American Ninja tonight, Firewalker, there's a lot of Chuck Norris involved with Canon Films. So we are doing one of the all-time Canon Films classics and one of Kevin's favorites, Invasion USA.
Mm-hmm.
You got to talk Masters of the Universe, of course. And, Canon Films brought us the muscles from Brussels, Jean-Claude Van Damme with Bloodsport. But the next one that's going to be coming up after Firewalker, Kevin, is one that he may have done a CPT way back in the day, a special Valentine's episode, but that was before we were on YouTube and before something that is coming out shortly that has inspired us to say, we need to revisit this film as part of this retrospective. Kevin, it's one of your all-time favorites, and that is Cobra.
Yeah, looking forward to doing Cobra. They're releasing a new 4K special version in July, and we'll do the show after we have a chance to review that. I don't know. I doubt it that they're going to have that, so-called original extended director's cut that we've always wanted. That wasn't the 89-minute one that we got, that we'll be talking about, that we love so dearly. But we will check that out and share that on that podcast.
We might consume some pizza with scissors during the podcast.
And it's an era release, so we should get some cool new special features. I'm hoping for a couple of new interviews or something.
Yeah. I got that on special order, so I can't wait.
Me too.
Well, this is a very special addition to this Canon Films retrospective. As I mentioned a little earlier, Kevin and I went through trying to figure out the movies, and we went to Lacey because she is the queen of movie flu, and she's like, you have to do Firewalker. If you're doing Canon Films, you have to do Firewalker. So, Lacey, the big question, because we kind of held off on asking you this but we are curious, and the listeners are curious too. Why Firewalker?
Okay, so there's something about the adventure films, the buried treasure, but the it's I want to say it's the knowledge involved in treasure hunting that has always been interesting to me, whether it's Indiana Jones, whether it's Romancing the Stone, it could be Alan Quartermain, it could be, there's so many, kind of knockoffs or, homages, we'll say, just to be nice. But I think this is one that kind of gives that feel where you've got like an Indiana Jones style, you've got a little bit of, people have to be, it's not just kind of running and thugging, like jumping and, it's you have to know what you're talking about. You have to figure out. I love puzzles. I've always loved puzzles. So mysteries or adventures are kind of my jam.
Gotcha. Okay.
Kyle, I'm glad that Lacey chose this one because when it came to adventure films, we all have to, of course, give a nod to Indiana Jones for kind of resurrecting it because it was a thing that we saw a lot more in classic cinema. And I'm sure, Adam, you know what I'm talking about. But, and I want to get your thoughts on this, too, on this kind of adventure treasure hunting, idol type gold adventure stuff that these adventurous type people are always setting out to. And it felt like in the 80s, thanks to Indiana Jones, we got a lot more of that. Yes, a lot of them were more lower budget, like the Alan Quartermains and Jake Speeds and other stuff like that. But I'm thankful that we had that because if we couldn't get Indiana Jones, we would get that kind of feel with these films. Do you feel the same, Adam, about that?
I think the big thing with that time period. So obviously, 1980, we got Raiders of the Lost Ark, 81 or whatever it was. And yeah, like it obviously was this film, which was for most of it, all in camera effects, stunt work, just as good as any other film out there, and done in that sort of what do they call it, the Republic serial style. So it had that same sort of, I guess, influence that Star Wars got from the Buck Rogers and the Flash Gordon. Same era storytelling, fast action, very visual storytelling. The dialogue didn't matter too much, and this is where something like Canon really goes into it because they're famous for having big scripts like this, but then they just start tearing pages out so long as it hits the budget. And that's what these are, our budget adventures. Now, Firewalker is probably the best example, but it's not the only example that Canon did. They did close to about 10 other films just like this. Now, some of them had the top actors, like in this case, Chuck was one of their two Chucks. They had obviously Charlie Bronson and they had Chuck Norris. So they had two piles where they used to put each of the movie scripts came in and they went, all right, this will go for Chuck, this will go for Charles, this will go for Chuck, this will go for Charles. And they would build upon that. And obviously Chuck was looking to expand his pretty much, let's just say, one-note action style or acting style, if you like. We knew what he had, but there was a sense of humor. The man actually has charisma if you look at it. And you only have to look at some of the later examples of that where he embraced both the action, but brought a bit of that ad-libbing to his style as well. Firewalker is where it really started. So Lacey's picked a film which I think was a bit of a curve in his career, and particularly for Canon Films, it sort of branched out a little bit. And, you're bringing in actors like, obviously, Louis Gossett Jr. had just done a certain big movie with, of course, Dennis Quaid called Enemy Mine, and that even opened up him even more. A film which, by its own point, it's a bit like this. It looks like it's going to be a big sci-fi extravaganza, but it becomes this survival tale of two really good friends. And I think this is what happens in Firewalker as well.
Yeah. I think it's interesting too, guys, because we think about this particular genre, and it feels like it really has transitioned from the movies in this modern era. Yes, we've had a couple of Indiana Jones films that have come out kind of to mixed results, I think it's fair to say, but this particular adventure genre really has transitioned more over to video games, like with Tomb Raider and the Uncharted series. And then those video games now are being brought back in live action film. We've obviously had a couple of iterations of Tomb Raider, including another one that is coming out as an Amazon series, I believe. And then we are also have this iteration of Uncharted with Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg that came out, which there's still rumors that they might do a sequel of that. It did make enough money in the box office. So it's really interesting how this genre of films has changed. But without Indiana Jones, and you don't get all these movies in the 80s, and it's really great. And Firewalker is a great example of this. But that also brings me to, since we have the mullet here, we need to talk about Canon Films a little bit. Now, if you joined us for our American Ninja show, we did have our thoughts about Canon, Lacey, myself, and Kevin. But Adam, this is your first appearance on this retrospective. Hopefully it won't be your last. We've got some other fun films lined up. But tell me, you being in Australia, growing up in Australia, Canon Films was such a U.S. company, even though it felt like it was a world, even though it was really kind of a global thing. But these were all really feel like heavy American films. What was the Canon influence for you growing up? And what was it like in Australia with Canon Films?
So Canon Films is very much, something that took over all the shelves in VHS stores. I even remember some Betamax as well at one stage. But the Betamax was very, very short time for us out here in Australia. It got cleaned up by about 84, 85. There wasn't much left. But VHS was everywhere. So if you looked in not only in your new release section, but in your action section, your martial arts, they really had it panned out. They had one movie for each area, or in this case, martial arts. A lot of different areas, obviously. But for me, it was starting with, again, the ninja movies was really the first one that got me in there. It was Franco Nero, obviously, with Enter the Ninja with Shokasugi, and obviously that film done in the Philippines, which they tend to actually go to the Philippines a lot, Canon Pictures, because it was so cheap at the time. But some great crews, some great stuntmen there as well. Obviously, we've got that, and then it moved on with I pretty much followed Shokasugi's line, and then any other films at the time. But there was the saturation, so we definitely got a lot of Canon Films out there. Now, obviously, those that listen to my podcast, Lethal Mullet Podcast, we've done just about every action and martial arts picture that have been in the line of Canon Films. This is the thing that got me started in martial arts. It wasn't Karate Kid. It was watching all the product that came out, obviously with Michael Dudikoff and Steve James. Personally, one of my favorites is not actually their American Ninjas. It is actually Avenging Force, which Kevin and I have talked about before. It is a film which builds on the strength of their character and their brotherhood, if you like, and then it sort of moves it to a whole other level because it has martial arts and all that in there, but it's like Hard Target. It's done in the bayou. You've got a lot of these great, and some of the hunters that are after him are really good at that too. Now, before I go any further, I'm well versed in these because of thanks to Steve Lambert's, because the great one, which is his biography, the late great Stephen Lambert, I should say. And it's From the Streets of Brooklyn to the Halls of Hollywood. This is his work as both a stuntman and coordinator in a lot of those great films, right up to Time Cop, etc. His thoughts on obviously Steven Seagal, which is one interesting read in there too.
Was he the one that recently passed away?
Yeah, sadly he did, yeah.
I thought of him because we did the Time Cop Couch Potato Theater, and I just recently watched him again. We may all have for Time Warp, guys, because he is the famous guy wearing the backpack in the movie Total Recall that gets shot from both sides, and Arnold uses him as a human shield. So that's cool, man.
So this is a very big read, and I can tell you there's a lot of great stuff in there, even surprising stuff about American Ninja, which I won't spoil for readers out there. Now, the other one is actually from the director. So this one is called Stories from the Trenches, Adventures in Making High-Octane Hollywood Movies with Canon veteran film director and creator Sam Furstenberg. And look, it even has a bit of Ninja the Domination on there, Dudikoff's on there, Steve James. Yes, there you go. Late great Steve
cover.
James. It's a very beautiful cover. And again, huge book. Now, this is now a lot of the stuff obviously is American Ninja in there. A lot of Avenging Force because he was the director on that as well. A lot of the Shokasugi movies, obviously Revenge of the Ninja and Ninja 3 The Domination, which is another great one. Misunderstood one, I think, is fantastic 80s film. But the great thing about this is you get his style of what was going on behind the scenes, and everyone loves Sam's work. So, again, we cover. Yeah, he's just amazing. But the great thing about Canon is it's budget adventures, and you knew what you were going to get. What it said on the cover was what you were going to get. Might not be as big as you thought it was going to be, but it was budget.
Well said.
Well, with that, too, guys, we are here to talk about a great Canon film, and that is Firewalker. So, without further ado, let's couch potato theater this thing and talk Firewalker. Okay, guys, we have all our fun categories here at Couch Potato Theater. So let's dive into them, and we always like to kick things off with the IMDb, possibly vague, not always spot-on plot description. So what did IMDb give us? A pair of adventurers try to track down an ancient Aztec, Mayan, Egyptian, Apache hoard of gold. I think that.
It's pretty vague, but yeah.
Yeah.
Can I did provide a bit longer version with more context, so those that maybe don't know the plot as well or haven't seen the film might spell it out a little bit more. So the plot goes, Max Donegan sets off on a treasure hunt with his friend Leo and newly acquired partner Patricia, who provided the treasure map. Along the way, they encounter a few bar fights, evil coyotes, in quotation marks, and other obstacles they are able to overcome with ease. When they find the temple with the treasure, they also find the Firewalker, who wants to retain the power of his ancestors and put an end to the trio's treasure hunt. In the end, Max and his two friends persevere and return home wealthy.
I think that works out a little bit better there as far as description goes. But interestingly enough, so Firewalker came out in 1986, and of course distributed by Canon. Came out November 21st. Running time is 104 minutes, and its box office was almost 12 million, about 11,800,000. The interesting thing was this film was one of Canon's strongest performing movies at the box office in 86. However, it was a relative disappointment compared to other Norris films, earning a little over 10 million. It was ultimately considered a flop. Canon went into financial receivership soon afterwards. In November of 86, Firewalker was released alongside some other notable films that might have affected its box office a little bit, because you had Stand By Me, Top Gun, and Something Wild. Firewalker itself was a relatively successful release, playing in 1,120 theaters, while Top Gun played in 1,531. So, interesting things with Firewalker as far as it got a fairly good-sized release, but it just didn't register with a lot of people. And I'm wondering kind of why that might be. I think people kind of, if you're asking me, I think people were seeing Chuck Norris and expecting a little bit more Chuck Norris out of Firewalker.
Plus, you had the Top Gun still in theaters from its summer release. These are when they kept playing, and Stand By Me was a huge hit too. I mean, it just came out.
Yeah. So it did not have much of a chance in the box office. But Kevin, we do have some production notes as well. I know you did some digging here, so you want to help me out and kind of kick off some of these production notes for us?
Yeah. So these are interesting. So we get a different Chuck Norris from this film. Norris set out to create a comedy, but pivoted to Firewalker after connecting with writer Robert Gosnell. Blending action and humor, the film marked his first lighter role, which he described as adventurous and fun, akin to Romancing the Stone from '84. Despite initial skepticism from Cannon's chairman, Norris leveraged his box office draw and took the risk, trusting audience reception to guide his future projects. Co-star Louis Gossett Jr. praised his dedication to expanding his range. Filming took place in Mexico in June of '86. Quote, "It's a detour," said Norris. Max Donegan is really the lighter side of Chuck Norris. He added, "It's just an open, friendly, warm film with lots of humor. It has adventure of Romancing a Stone and Raiders of the Lost Ark, the humor of the movie Crocodile Dundee, where the situations cause the humor, and the companionship between the two guys, just like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid." And they go on here, talked a lot about their experiences here. And so what we're seeing here, guys, is a different version of Chuck Norris. Thoughts?
I think I give him a lot of credit for making this decision, and I understand exactly why he did it. But I think this is one of those times where sometimes you got to know your lane. And I think while Chuck was trying to do something, people at that, especially at that point in the '80s, they wanted a certain thing from their Chuck Norris films, and they didn't want variation. And I think that's kind of what ended up happening here with Firewalker. Was like, it's all right, but I need more kick-ass in my Chuck Norris right now. So,
although we appreciate it more now, but you're onto something there.
Lacey, what about you?
Well, I was going to say, just a second ago, I looked up how many movies I have with Chuck Norris. And the funny thing is that I have 6 movies with Chuck Norris. And they're all, with the exception of Invasion USA, they're all comedies. So, maybe I was like the one person who was like, "Firewalkers, yay!" And everybody else was like, "Really, Chuck?" I was like, "Yes, Chuck, that's awesome."
A little ode to Dodgeball there. I like that.
Yeah,
Thank you, Chuck Norris.
And sidekicks, like, come on, sidekicks,
Okay.
come on.
Yeah.
What about you, Adam? With the Chuck Norris decision here, you think where Chuck was? You understand what Chuck was trying to do?
He had too many films already sort of set in stone about his style. And it's a little bit like, Bronson's a perfect example. Once you head down that lane, people have an expectation. You might be able to change the story. You might be able to change the setting. You might even change the style of action. But they don't want you to change. And it was too late to do that. He should have done it in the 70s when he was, halfway through. So he's already in his 40s in the late 70s. So he was a late bloomer even to action films and stuff like that too. So it was hard because you've got to remember, martial arts was a very new genre, even in the 80s. We're only talking 20 years after the 60s, right? So for him to be in that is already something that's groundbreaking. And you've got to look at some of the interviews even as far back as even before Octagon. We're talking about right back for, even his earliest work, in Hong Kong, because he did a Hong Kong movie as well before he really took off. And the trick is he had Bruce Lee to go off, right? Not just as a karate teacher, or in this case, he was learning Jun Fan Kung Fu from him at the time. What he was learning was how to master martial arts on a widescreen, which is a huge thing, right? Those that are in the martial arts, like myself, who teach martial arts is not cinematic at all. If it's good martial arts, you really don't see much happening, right? So that he mastered that by accentuating the form, by doing those big kicks, which a lot of karate isn't kicking at all, to be honest with you folks. It's takedowns, it's punching, it's all that sort of stuff, grappling. So they,
isn't it?
Yeah, very much.
Offensive?
Very much. You're reacting to the energy around you and what comes to you. But to visualize that, you have to then make it theatrical. And to make it theatrical, you need to do those big flamboyant kicks because it's showing what it does, But then to master something that's even harder, which is comedy, and to do it well. And I think he can kind of, if it had gone more Frank Drebin style, like just straight, which he kind of does in this, I think it would have been more effective just to leave him in his central style that he has and let him ad-lib a little bit. I think that would have been the way to go. And then everything would be funny around him, but he just plays it straight. I think that's probably where they went wrong as far as trying to do more of those later on. But I mean, he's really branched out from what he had. I mean, Sidekicks is a fantastic film. That is a film which who was the guy? It was the bad guy in that. The other instructor. It's kind of like Sensei Kreese. It was Joe Piscopo, was it?
I think it was.
Yeah, very well built guy too. He's apparently a stand-up comedian himself, but and a martial artist. So what they did was fantastic with it because they played to the strengths of Chuck. And I think if you watch the later films like Delta Force 2, you look at some of the other ones, he's adding in comedy there, but it works within his lane, as Kyle was saying.
Yeah. Well, guys, I think it's important that it's interesting as in action stars involved, because I think Chuck Norris did kind of set a path, and they saw where he made some deviations, and that's why he was a trailblazer. And sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. And you look at more of recent modern action stars like a Jason Statham or even like a Dave Bautista or something, where they've been able to branch out and do a little bit of comedies in their own right, but they did it at a point where I think it fit more within their career. So it's very interesting to see, for me, what, as far as that particular idea goes, is how Chuck kind of set examples for people going forward. And I think that's one of the great things about Chuck. But let's talk with how did you watch this movie recently? Did you see it in the theater, streaming, physical? And remember, when and where was the first time that you saw this film? Lacey, since you are the one who picked this film, when was the first time you saw this, and what was the most recent way you watched it?
I saw this at the Galleria Theater in Atlanta, Georgia. And I want to say it was 86, so I would have been like 13. Well, it was November, so I'd have been 14. And I mean, so I was probably dropped off by my parents or whatever with a couple of friends. But I'll tell you this. I saw it with a bunch of my guy friends because all my girlfriends were like, what? Ew, what? Why? Ew. And I'm like, you guys, come on. So I saw it with I had this pack of guys that I hung out with because all of my girlfriends were very, very frilly. And I was not a frilly girl. I was very much a tomboy. And so I loved action adventure stuff. And so, we went and saw this at the Galleria Theater. I'm pretty sure we saw it twice in a row that day because we saw it and then there was 45 minutes. So we went across to the arcade and played for 20 minutes and then came back and watched it again. And it was great. We had a blast. It was super fun. Really relaxed. It's back when, movies were exactly 89 minutes or 91 minutes or whatever. So this one was a little bit longer at the time, which was unusual, which is why there was such a gap between the two showings, because they were trying to sync them up with the other showings. So of the other movies that were there. But And then most recently, I have my Blu-ray, super exciting, by Olive distribution company. So that's how I saw it recently.
What about you, Mr. Mullet? When was the first time you saw this, under what format, and how did you most recently watch it?
First time would have been on VHS. So it was on was it Amiga Video? We had so many different film companies coming out with their own video shops as well. So we had Amiga Video, Blockbuster, not the American one, and they're an Australian company. Same idea. But there's also one really interesting one, which was VideoFlix was another one. But anyway, I saw it on one of those, and it was on a crusty old VHS, very bad print and all that sort of stuff. But the one thing I remember was being old enough to remember John Rhys Davies in the film as well as the lady from Flash Gordon. So I was like, okay, there's definitely something going on there. And then I watched it on TV maybe about 2 or 3 years later when I was I was 13 or 14. Then I hadn't seen it for years, and it returned on streaming when I first got Netflix. So we saw that there. But I've got a very similar Blu-ray to Lacey a couple of years ago through this little shop that Kevin, the Resident Writer, might know as JB Hi-Fi.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Raider Nerd and yourself, when was the first time you saw this, and what was your most recent viewing?
All right. I'm going to start with my most recent viewing because it gets a little interesting how I first saw it. So my most recent viewing, actually, last night, it's on YouTube for free. with commercials. But I had already watched it recently. So I did watch it on YouTube because I'm here in Australia, for a month. But I recently also watched it at home with my copy Blu-ray that I bought in Australia. It might have been a JB Hi-Fi. I can't remember if it was one of the used stores I found here. So it's the Australian version. Of course, I have an all-region player, so I was able to play it. But I think it was because, I don't know if you mentioned it, Adam, or maybe because you might have talked about it or whatever. I'll be perfectly honest with you. I don't remember this in the theater at all, at least in my hometown of Santa Barbara. I don't remember it all. But I do remember the VHS cover. I remember seeing it on VHS stands for a very, very long time. But I never picked it up and watched it. And friends of mine, we didn't watch it. I don't know if someone had mentioned that it's like, it's a different type of Chuck Norris. He's not your surly one-man army guy that you're used to seeing. And so, and to me, it felt like kind of like a cheesy version of an Indiana Jones adventure. And so I never watched it back then, nor through the 90s. I believe I watched it for the first time within the last few years when I picked up that Blu-ray copy, because I think, Adam, you might have mentioned it, talking about it, or you should check it out or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so I recently watched it for the first time within the last few years when I bought that Blu-ray copy on a previous visit in Australia. Because, I was branching out, trying new things. And there's just certain movies for whatever reason, that movie just even though I saw it all the time on the video shelves, I just did not want to dive. It just didn't look like the Chuck Norris movie that I wanted to see. But I felt that I was proven wrong. It was one that I should have seen a long time ago.
We mentioned it on the Invasion USA pod we did on LM a long while ago. Yeah. So it's one, because we're looking at the time, what's he done at that same time? And he'd done pretty much Missing in Action, this one, The Octagon, which is probably my favorite. And then all of a sudden, Firewalker, you're like, hang on.
Yeah.
Well, for me, the first time I saw it was actually VHS. This did not stay in the theater long when I was living in Alaska at the time, and it wasn't a huge theater. So they didn't have a lot of screens. I think it was maybe in the theater for like 2 weeks, and it was out. So VHS was the first time I saw this. And then my most recent watching was thank you to our good friends over at Tubi, because it is on Tubi, and that is how I watched it with minimal ads. There was a few. But
I tried to find it on Tubi here in Australia. They didn't have it.
So that's how we've all seen it. So now that we've all told you how we've seen it, let's have a little discussion about the Firewalker. And Kevin, you found an interesting article on not only Firewalker, but this particular genre of film that I think had some really good points to it.
Yeah, I try to find that on these older films. It's always fun to find a recent article about it, because nostalgia has set in, obviously, and I'd like to see what other people are saying about these movies that we like and that we're discussing. And I found one dated back January 27th, 2019, and it is on Mike's Take on the Movies, Rediscovering Cinema's Past of 80s Daily Take. And I want to give him credit to this article that I found here. And he goes on to say, the long shadow of Indiana Jones was still in vogue by the time this J. Lee Thompson director effort hit the big screen. Menheim Golan and Yoram Globus, who I know I mispronounced that, sorry, who fronted the Cannon films, were perhaps the company that was riding the coattails of Spielberg and Lucas more than any other at the time. They had already released the Dick Chamberlain flick, King Solomon's Mines, and the follow-up Alan Quatermain in The Lost City of Gold into theaters prior to this release. Which brings us to Chuck Norris, Louis Gossett tale of two treasure-hunting buddies chasing gold and adventure. Might I dare say this might be the most enjoyable Chuck Norris flick of all upon a revisit that's been 30-plus years in the making? Yes, Chuck is the charmer, and his skills with the ladies is paying off with Melody. The two are falling for each other as a treasure hunt sends them deeper and deeper into the jungle terrain and the palm of John Rhys Davies, who intends to someday be a Marlon Brando-like Colonel Kurtz and the kind of territory. Not to worry just yet, he's still the friendly type. And it goes on through the thing here and some of the comparisons that they're making here, of course. But the one thing I did want to mention here is, does anyone recall the show Relic Hunter with sexy Tia Carrera? Remember that show? Yes. That's what this movie reminded me of, and this is what the author says, minus the leading lady who, quote, I'm not worthy to ever meet, quote, unquote. To squeeze anything into a 105-minute running time, the trio of fortune hunters have everything fall into their place, escaping death on numerous occasions, and locate the you-know-what is easily I can fathom just how the treasure hadn't been plundered centuries ago. And in conclusion, he says, if you like canon films, it's a must, and I couldn't help think it would make a decent adventure to share with a grandkid of the right age bracket if you have one. I'll add it to my list of when that my time comes, if it ever does, and the little tyke enjoys the film enough for multiple viewings, as kids are prone to doing. Maybe I'll gift him, her, or him my original one-sheet poster I have tucked away for quite a while. And if you check out the article online, the author actually takes a picture with his poster. So I just want to bring that up because, guys, I want to ask you a question as I was I want to thank Mike here. There's this adventure feel that this movie has, and it seems kid safe, especially for kids of a certain age now. Goonies came out around this time as well. Adam, your take on this kind of adventurous feel that this movie has, despite that we're getting a lighter side version and this kind of buddy adventure film with these two actors?
I think for the most part, again, it is something that was like the Phantom kind of a little bit. You know, it's got that thing of climax is always happening. One is going to be smaller than the one at the end. And it's that very adventurous storytelling of, you know, they've got to problem solve something to get to the next level, not just about it, you know, finding a relic or a jewel of the Nile, whatever it is in this. They're kind of, it's testing themselves. The real jewel of these sort of stories is what you find within yourself, the courage, all that sort of stuff. And that was always about what Indiana Jones was. It was always about what, you know, that sort of adventure serial was. And that does that really well in this because it's not just two people in there, and plus obviously Melody in this as well, coming together to find that. It's also using the mind. The mind is sort of like this thing that's not really tapped in a lot of those films. You know, they have to outthink their ways, particularly against the Sonny Landham in this and the others that they come up against. And I think that's really done well in a lot of these adventure films. This one in particular, I think, feels a bit more old-fashioned, even in the 1980s than, let's say, Raiders. Raiders, yes, it was trying to be old-fashioned. It was trying to be all that, but you couldn't help with the way Spielberg directs that it felt current, even though it was 1930s or whatever it was. This one actually feels like, because J. Lee Thompson directed it, and unfortunately he's a very old-fashioned director. So if you've seen his other work, you'll understand why. But I feel they've captured that because of that.
Nice.
Lacey, what about your feelings as far as it capturing the genre that it was trying to do, and just, you know, your general thoughts on the film? I mean, this again, it was your pick, and you know, I think it's one of the more interesting films in Chuck Norris's career and in canon films history.
Well, okay, so I loved let's pick any part of this film, whether it's the casting or the locations. I'm going to use air quotes for those who are listening and not watching. Some of the locations are like almost like deliberately not cheesy, but you can tell where they shaved their budget. You know,
yeah.
The costuming, the fact that in the 80s, the only reason they would have taken a woman on one of these trips is because she was not just paying them to do something, but she had to be there because she was psychic, right? So she had to be there, right? Because back then it would be like the woman is going to hire you to do the thing, and then you're going to bring back the whatever, right? But just the way it was kind of, you know, played out, and of course you can't have a woman there without having a relationship between her and one of the characters. But you know, it was just the movie's fun, and it was just one of my favorite flicks to kind of go back to every time. I had this on VHS. I wore out my VHS copy. You know, I bought it multiple times on VHS. It was just one of those ones, and it was family friendly. Like my dad would watch this movie. You know, it's not, you know, a lot of times, you know, if your teenage daughter is watching a movie, you're not going to walk in and be like, oh, well, I can watch that, you know. I watched a lot of like random stuff, and this is one of those ones where if it was a Saturday afternoon and he was walking through, he'd go, nice Firewalker, and he'd sit down and watch it with me. So lots of fun things about this movie. It's not just, I mean, it's very much of its time, right? I mean, as we discussed some of the, the gender roles and that kind of thing. But I think that it does give it gives a good visual for the 80s while also giving the visual for almost like a timeless sort of thing. Like it's almost time because they're in pyramids and jungles and all this kind of stuff. So it's not really it's hard to pinpoint a time frame other than like the fact that they're wearing 100% khaki and she's wearing a dress in the jungle, like that kind of thing. So yeah, I think I just rambled. I don't know where I was starting there, and I don't know where I was going. Yeah. And I think this also kind of because Indiana Jones and then Romancing the Stone and then this, and of course Alan Quartermain, and even going forward, I think the reason that I even bothered to see the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen was because I knew that Alan Quartermain was going to be one of the characters. Like that was, I mean, don't get me wrong. Once I saw it, I was like, yay, fun. But a lot of people hated that movie, but I was going to go see it because it had Alan Quartermain. So it's just that adventure type thing that I was always going to watch. And Chuck Norris and Louis Gossett, I tell you, like his laugh is one of like the best laughs in cinema. That deep kind of chuckle that he does, like nobody else has that. And I miss that. It's such a good laugh. He has such a good, like, especially when he's giving you the I told you so laugh. Like that's just one of my favorite laughs. And yeah, lots of really good fun bits in the movie. So
Kevin, what about you? I mean, we've talked about it a little, but dive a little deeper in for it.
Yeah, it hits a certain genre that because of Indiana Jones and seeing a bunch of older films of like Tarzan and stuff like that really wanted you to get out there and find the treasure and live vicariously through these adventures. And the thing about Indiana Jones that really hit home with me was I remember seeing Star Wars in the theater, and it was a religious experience for me. But Indiana Jones for me felt grounded, and it made me want to be that type of person. It made me want to go out on my bike and try to find stuff, and where we would just come home when it was dark type of days, and this film Firewalker tickles that urge a little bit because you got two friends being the two partners as opposed to just being the one guy and the girl, And I like that we have these two buddies that work well with this girl that comes in, and she's a wealth of knowledge as well. And she also helps along with the adventure. She's just not a pretty face. And then, of course, you come across these other characters that, yes, maybe they're dangerous, but they're funny, and they're entertaining. We'll touch on that a little bit more. And that's what this movie does for me, is it brings that adventure movie that I love going to the theater or watching on home video for.
I think with this film, you have to keep a couple things in mind. It is a canon film, so you know what kind of quality you're probably really getting with this. For me, with this movie, and even in the rewatch, it's kind of one of those things I have to remind myself of, because this movie does very much feel like one of those old 60s adventure films with some 80s elements to it. But one of the things that I've always had a problem with this film, even from my first watching, is the storyline tends to jump a little bit. There's some logic leaps, and you feel like you're missing pieces of the story at times because of just how brisk pace it moves and the way Canon did their movies. But that's the thing. You just throw that out because this gives you that sense of adventure type films, and you have fun with it. And I think that's the big thing with this film. And and we're going to talk about the cast in a little bit, but I mean, I think that's the other thing. You're talking about two of the biggest castings of the 80s. I mean, these are two huge stars. Chuck Norris is huge. Louis Gossett Jr. has done Officer and Gentleman. He's done Enemy Mine, Iron Eagles around this time. So, you've got Louis Gossett is in high demand right now. So this was very interesting. This was always one of the fun aspects of canon films. But guys, we've given our thoughts on it. But what about what the critics and other people might have said. We've got some movie review information here. So when we look at the critical response on Rotten Tomatoes, for whatever you value Rotten Tomatoes as, it's got an 8 on the tomato meter and an 8% on the tomato meter and a 33% on the popcorn meter. So the popcorn thing, I think, is fairly new to them, but Firewalker received mixed to negative reviews, which critics frequently comparing it to unfavorably to contemporary adventure films. While some praised its lighthearted tone, blend of action, humor, along with its entertaining, easygoing nature and Norris's attempt at comedy, others felt it had a derivative plot, wooden performances, and lackluster production values. Guys, we're talking Cannon films. Come on. The film was one of Cannon's top box office performers in 1986, but it fell short compared to other Norris films, earning over $10 million domestically. On At the Movies, Gene Siskel and Robert Ebert gave the picture 2 thumbs down. Oh, Roger, you're killing me. Siskel said Firewalker was one of the most derivative films in years, splicing elements of Raiders of the Lost Ark with Romancing the Stone. He went on saying he believed the movie was probably signed as a deal 1 month after the grosses started coming in for Romancing, and that was where the creativity stopped.
I would have done the same. I'm just saying. I love it. Just let's go ahead and combine these. No shame. Let's copy.
Let's do it. Well,
hold on. Lacey wants to say something. Hold on.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it makes sense. A lot of people were talking about how, it felt like it was pacing issues or, whatever, because you literally have the 2 guys' relationship set up. Then you add a girl, then you find a clue, then you have a guide for like a minute, and then you fight, and then you win, and the movie's over. Like, you have 6 points that you have to hit, and they just went, okay, well, we found the girl, now let's do the fight, or now let's do the guide. Okay, now we got to have the clue now. So they had all the pieces and stuff. It's just that maybe they were looking to get that, shortened time frame or whatever, so they could fit it into the movies. And I think that it literally hits all the things, so I don't have a problem with it. It hits all the buttons it's supposed to hit. Maybe people just, I don't know, people are grumpy.
It gets interesting too, because in Roger Ebert's take, Ebert said that he would have tried to make a picture that didn't look like a cheap, watered down, pale, and uninteresting version of all those other adventure movies. In his print review, Ebert gave Firewalker 1 star out of 4 and wrote, "The movie is a free-form anthology of familiar images from the works of Steven Spielberg, subjected to a new process that we would call discolorization. The film lacked the style, witty dialogue, and magic of the current adventure movies, as it borrowed its closing images from the Indiana Jones films, but its press notes optimistically claim the picture is in the tradition of Romancing the Stone. In literature, it's called plagiarism. In the movies, it's called homage." So, yeah, Roger kind of summed it up. But we had some positive reviews too, because Kevin Thomas of the Los Angeles Times enjoyed it, and he explained Firewalker isn't as elaborate or sophisticated as the Spielberg Lucas hit. It is fun, and Norris is loosened up and laid back. Of the cast, he said, really get into the lighthearted spirit of the occasion. His final thought was that is handsomely filmed in Mexico by Alex Phillips. Firewalker seems to have brought out the best in everyone on either side of the camera.
Also, too, I wanted to mention one of the things I wanted to mention too was the if you're looking at the slideshow here on YouTube, we've got one of those classic newspaper ads, and it was in the New York area because you can see all the locations like Brooklyn, Bronx, and Queens, Manhattan. But what I love about it is when you saw these newspaper ads for your film, they always had one beat writer or someone from a newspaper that would give a quote on it. Preferably, it's a favorable one, like this one here. Hank Gallo of the New York Daily News says, "Firewalker, a fun romp of a comedy adventure. The cast is great fun." There you go.
Well, guys, we're gonna keep things moving on here because we're gonna talk a little trivia. It is movie trivia time here on Couch Potato Theater, and we've got some interesting tidbits on Firewalker. Kevin, you did the research on this. I want you to kick things off.
All right, so I didn't know this, but this is very cool. Chuck Norris and Louis Gossett Jr. have their stars back-to-back on the actual Hollywood Walk of Fame.
That is awesome. Now, this piece of trivia is right up my alley because I actually used to own this particular comic book. El Coyote is seen reading the Marvel comic Cyforce #1 from the short-lived New Universe line. Canon and Marvel were trying to make a Spider-Man film at the same time, Marvel would also publish 4 issues of Chuck Norris Karate Commandos soon after the release of this film. I own that issue of Sci-Force. I remember when the New Universe line came out. So I remember seeing that for the first time. I'm going, I own that comic. So, Kevin, you got some more trivia for us?
Yeah, John Rhys Davies, as of course Adam brought up earlier, appeared in another action comedy adventure flick about treasure hunters from the Cannon Group, King Solomon's Mines, 1985.
Yes.
I feel like John Rhys was just like, let's get the sidekick guy. He can also play like a guy that wants to lead an army. I mean, I feel like let's just get this guy in here. He'll come in and do it.
I think there was Hollywood union rules that if you were doing a movie like this, John Rhys Davies had to be part of it.
Yes.
And let's not forget his time in the Dune franchise too, in Dune 2 and the Emperor Battle for Dune, where he came back and worked for the Atreides as basically like Thufir Hawat. He was one of the Mentats. Charging on the armies, get out there and fight the Harkonnens. And that was his job. And he did so with a certain member of the Rebels Star Wars group as well. Her name is Vanessa.
Great character actor.
Yeah. Bodybuilder Lou Ferrigno, who played the Incredible Hulk in the television series of the same name, was working as Norris's personal trainer during production of this film. Chuck never got angry enough in this movie. I'm just going to say.
I see what you did there, Kyle. Here's a fun one. This is Aaron Norris, Chuck Norris's brother, last film as a stunt coordinator. He began his career as a director with his next film, Braddock Mission in Action 3.
And
there was that. What was that other bit of trivia that they said about this movie? And it's all about the beginning. They said in the beginning there was nothing. Absolutely nothing before the Big Bang. In the beginning, there was nothing. Then Chuck Norris, roundhouse kicked nothing and told her to get a job.
Well, guys, this next piece of trivia, I feel like this was done intentionally. I can't imagine this was not. But several times throughout the movie, the eye patch worn by El Coyote switches back and forth from the right eye to the left eye. You know that was done intentionally. Come on, guys.
Well, hold on. I got a thought, but I know Lacey does here. Go ahead, Lacey.
I'm going to say that they probably realized that they had mistaken the eye line, and so they flipped the film in certain scenes to make the eye lines line up. And when you flip the film, everything goes in reverse.
Also, too, with Sonny Landham being Sonny Landham, I don't think anyone wanted to tell him it was on the wrong eye.
We're going to talk about Sonny in a little bit. Yeah.
What year was this film set in? Was it 1940?
I think it's current day because of the car that you see and stuff like that, and the weapons that you see. It's set in current day time. I questioned that at first, but then I did a little research.
Yeah. Well, I found a bit of trivia on when because I thought it was 1940. It says, since 1940, the year Chuck Norris was born, the roundhouse kick related deaths have increased 13,000%.
Okay, Kevin, you want to hit us up with another piece of trivia?
Yeah, Firewalker was the name of Cordell Walker's father in Walker, Texas Ranger, 1993.
And finally, the final scene is supposed to be in Fiji, when in reality it was shot at the Le Cliff restaurant located in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. If you look closely, you can see the cliff diving platforms out front. I
was wondering about that because you could see these really high angled ladders to get to certain parts of that area. So yeah, it was cool.
Okay, guys, well, that's going to wrap up the trivia. Let's get into some of our favorite moments and things that have happened in this film. That's right, guys. We're going to talk about some of our favorite from Firewalker. Lacey, you were the queen who picked this, so you get first crack. Tell me about some of your favorite scenes in this film.
The conversation that was had when they're dressed as priests and a nun has that delightful little innuendo there that's just hilarious, and nobody picks up on it, until you're, a little bit older. But that's one of the best scenes. And then I love the fact that the character, of course, Max, he can't swim. So when they're in the Volkswagen Bug and it goes across and then it sinks, and he's like, "Get to shore," and he's like sitting on top of there. And when she's like, "You gotta swim. You can't tell me you don't know how to," and he's like dog paddling to get he's an adventurer. He's always in these types of situations. He doesn't know how to swim. I think that there was a lot of fun. I think that Chuck Norris is a guy in real life who has a great sense of humor. And I think that he was really trying to kind of be himself more in this movie. And I love that. I think those are two of my favorite scenes. Like just the whole idea that they're going to dress up as two priests and a nun.
Mr. Mullet, what about you? What are some of your favorite scenes from this movie?
I like the scenes with the general that really set it out was the desert scene at the start. You really know what you're in for, the comedy of it as well, and that they're laughing at the bad guy. I think that really sets out the tone of the film that you're going to have. And then it's also the scene in the bar. Obviously it's going to one of those things. You always have a scene in the bar in an adventure film, and it's always going to set out not only information that they're trying to find, whether it's they're trying to rustle for where to find a jewel or whatever it is in most of those films. But in this one, you're expecting Chuck to get out there and kick butt, and he's not very good at it.
What about you, Mr. Reitzel?
Adam touched on one of my favorites, the opening scene, because the general, let me get the actor's name here, Richard Lee Sung, great character actor. And when he arrives after his men had captured him, I love the fact that Chuck Norris's character says, "I bet he's going to say something like, oh, we finally meet again," and then like he says it. Yes, I thought was very funny. And I also did enjoy as they dressed up as clergy. Yeah, I thought that was very funny, and just the scenes up to it, because they didn't have papers. And, there's always the danger of coming across the guard saying, "Show us your papers," and that was always a really good scene. And I love the bar scene too, when Melody's character is just telling us, about, there's a little like, "Hey, I need your help," or like, what does she actually need? Is there something else deeper there? It's like, "No, I need your help finding." And I like the bar fight scene as well.
Yeah, those are all great scenes. I'm with you guys especially on the opening, and there's something here. And excuse me while I go back to the slide here, because there's a particular thing about this opening. And if you're watching on YouTube, I put this on the slide. The fact, because it is Chuck Norris, he is able to, with just his one hand, open a bottle of Perrier, so he can get the glass to cut the ropes to free himself. And he does it, and he doesn't even cut his own hand because he is Chuck Norris.
I just want to say something real quick, because I might forget it later, Kyle. But I feel like, because this movie came out in 1986, I believe Spaceballs came out around the same time. So I think Perrier/Perrier is having a pretty good year.
You think?
Also, too, I love the fact that she likes to just take pictures all the time. She was like always. That's like we're kind of like living vicariously through her character. I'd be taking pictures, wouldn't you guys? I don't know.
In other words, she is your selfie spirit soulmate there.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Just wanting to be sure on that. So now, guys, we got to talk about the cast, because the cast in this movie, especially for the time, is just absolutely mind blowing, and it's something that Canon is pretty actually famous for. Is they would spend the money to bring in the big names. And come on, we're talking Chuck Norris. We're talking the amazingly talented Louis Gossett Jr. Melody Anderson, of course, we all love her from Flash Gordon. She's great in it. A lot of actors in these films as well. And we'll talk about the guys, the producers from Ken here in just a second. I want to get your thoughts on the cast, because Kevin, there's one thing I need to bring up right now. Is the fact that Sonny Landham is in this film. And of course, if you are a fan of Predator, you know who Sonny Landham is. He's been in a lot of films. One of the few times I think in a movie too where the guy Chuck Norris is fighting is probably legitimately scary, and one of the few people on the planet who could actually take out Chuck Norris, Kevin.
Yeah, we heard stories about Sonny Landham talking about Predator when we did the Predator Couch Potato Theater, where they had to hire bodyguards, not necessarily to protect people or protect Sonny Landham, but to protect other people from Sonny Landham. Yeah, he's an imposing force in this film. One of the great character actors of all time, too.
Yeah. Lacey, what about you? Your thoughts on the cast?
The cast is fantastic. I love that, you have just kind of it's almost like they picked the perfect cast from other roles that they had played, right? They picked the wide-eyed girl from Flash Gordon and put her in the same character role. They pulled, what's his name? John Rhys Davies has done 2 movies as like the guy who kind of gives you a little bit of tidbits of information, maybe gives a little imposing, or maybe he's the jolly sidekick, that kind of thing. I think that I feel like this movie is a fantasy football kind of situation, right? Where they were like, okay, we got this script. If you could cast whoever, who would you do? And it'd be like, well, it'd be great if we could, like, this is totally Louis Gossett Jr. Oh, well, we could totally get. And I think that they did really well. I don't think there's anybody in this cast that I would replace.
Adam, what about you? What are your thoughts on the cast?
For the kind of budget that obviously Canon had back then, and to pull Louis Gossett Jr. in is amazing. Melody Anderson, obviously, too. She's doing a lot of work back here, not just on TV. Obviously, she's doing, for Flash Gordon. So she's done quite a bit of work. I think, and obviously the bad guys, fantastic, too. For this sort of cast, let's face it, Canon Pictures, apart from 1 or 2 leads, usually will get a lot of TV actors involved. And to get Sonny Landham, particularly, and John Rhys Davies, ever since Shogun, if there's an adventure serial or something set in the 1940s, he's your go-to guy, unless you wanted a dwarf, I guess, because that's what he did later. But, that's the sort of area that you got to look at. For these guys, it's perfect. I think a great cast.
Kevin, what about you? You talked a little bit about Sonny, but the cast for you in this?
The cast was great, and the villains were just as entertaining as your heroes. And like I mentioned earlier, I loved Richard Lee Sung as the general, especially when you get him at the end. He's like playing the bartender, because after they all have their loot, Lou Gossett's boat is there floating there, and it slowly pans up to him, and he goes, I'm, what does he say? Like something like fancy meeting you guys here again. So, if we were going to get more of him, I'm sure that he would have come in there. But it's nice there's a trope of like your villains getting captured, but then like, it's really like someone that they know, and so they're saved. And I love that it was John Rhys Davies as Corky, of all names, Corky, but he's like an up and coming jungle warlord wannabe, I guess, which I thought was funny as well. And a shout out to Will Sampson as Tall Eagle, the wise Indian that kind of guides them their way, but also says, in so many words, I don't want the money, but the money that you guys do get, bring it back to the people of this land, that type of thing. And Melody Anderson, just cute as a button. I didn't recognize her from Flash Gordon. I haven't seen Flash Gordon as much as other people have, but she was just great in this. She was funny, charming, and I wanted to see more of her in the adventures of these people. But I did want to give a shout out, if you don't mind, to the director himself, which I found interesting, is that J. Lee Thompson. He did a lot of work for Canon Films, guys. And what's interesting, too, is he worked with Charles Bronson a lot. He worked with Charles Bronson in Kinjite, The Forbidden Subjects, Messenger of Death, Death Wish 4, also Murphy's Law. and also Evil That Men Do, one movie that we discussed on our Time Warp of 1984, and also 1984 or 1983 Time Warp. We also did 10 to Midnight with Charles Bronson. So I felt like, guys, that he was kind of a canon like go-to guy. It's like, we need to get this guy for this film if we can get him away from Charles Bronson for one movie.
Yeah, exactly. And just real quick too, since you're talking about canon go-to guys, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention, of course, the famous two guys who were the head of canon films, Mannheim Golan and Yoram Globus, the two guys who founded canon films of the future. Lacey, I know I butchered the names. Please,
yeah, let Lacey pronounce it correctly.
Menachem Golan and Yoram Globus.
Go.
We're getting there. Well, by the end of this, we'll have it right. But
Yeah.
Remember how they say it in Electric Boogaloo, though? They say it different. They go,
Menachem, the ch for the H. You gotta get
Menachem Golan and Yoram Globus.
Well, and Adam mentioned it too. We're gonna mention this through every one of these, but there is a great documentary out there, Electric Boogaloo, if I can talk, the wild untold story of canon films. This is a fantastic documentary. This was one of the things that inspired us to do this canon films retrospective. Just some crazy stories out there, and of course, Kevin too. You tracked down this the Bombs, Babes, and Blockbusters of Canon Films 10 DVD pack collection, which I believe Miss Lacey has as well.
Yes, it has that documentary, the Electric Boogaloo documentary on there as well. But this movie, Firewalker, though, is not in part of this collection. But it does have several of the films that we're going to be discussing for Canon Films this year.
And then there's also the Go-Go Boys, which is another documentary.
Yeah, told from the brother's perspective. The cousins.
The cousins, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, guys, we have some other fun categories here at Couch Potato Theater, so let's get into them. And one of my favorite categories here, we like to have a little fun from one of my all-time favorite films, Ocean's 11. And guys, that is do you think we need one more? Who would you add to the cast, or as Kevin, because of his Indiana Jones love, Tom Selleck was Indiana Jones. Which cast member would you replace with another and who? So, guys, I'm going to throw this out at you. Would you add somebody to the cast, or would you replace somebody? Lacey, I already said, and we already know your love for the cast. Is there maybe somebody you might bring in for part of this?
You know, I think that it might have been nice to see maybe, oh gosh, I can't remember his last name. Ernie, the little martial arts kid, he was
Ernie Reyes Jr.
Reyes Jr. Yes, Ernie Reyes Jr. I mean, it's we kind of got used to Indiana Jones having the sidekick or something like that. Maybe like, kind of like a Ke Huy Quan character. That kind of thing. It doesn't have to be Ernie Reyes Jr. It could be any number of young martial arts, kids. But just someone who might have stumbled across who could help or hinder the situation. Maybe there's a kid who's like a street thief or something that snags the dagger and they have to go find him before they can finish the mission. Or I don't know, something fun. I don't think that it's necessary, but that's, if I was forced, I'd be like, maybe throw a kid in the mix.
What about you, Adam? Anybody you would want to add into this film or maybe swap out in the cast?
I wouldn't swap anyone out, but in that bar scene, I'd be throwing Shokasugi in there.
There you go. Mr. Reitzel?
Well, Lacey's onto something there because she and I were thinking the same thing when it came to having this scrappy kid, someone that could kind of help. And it is a trope you come across. Even American Ninja 2 had the scrappy kid, And I think that it would be nice if we had someone. And I was looking at like who was popular back during this time. And I was thinking, what about like a young River Phoenix comes in and be the scrappy kid? At the same year, he's doing Stand By Me. And I thought that would be kind of fun to do that. He would kind of come in for a little bit and or maybe he knows one of the two main cast members, or maybe he's related to the female lead's character. I thought that would have been kind of fun. And I was also trying to think too at the time, maybe adding, I don't know if replacing or adding would be the best thing, but Willem Dafoe. I thought Willem Dafoe during this time would have been kind of a nice thing to do because, in 85, he's doing To Live and Die in LA. He's like a really crazy character. And he's like a murderous counterfeiter, and he does Streets of Fire in 84, and I think that would have been kind of fun casting as well.
Well, for me, guys, I'm going to go a little different right here. I want one scene added where maybe we find out a little bit more about Melanie Anderson's character, how she came across this map or this story. I want Wilford Brimley to be like the adventurer grandfather that inspired her to be like this and have this little scene with him and her where that's how she gets inspired. And maybe if you were trying to go with another female in this movie that was kind of more the straight person, let's bring in Helen Slater, maybe to be Melanie Anderson's sister or something, who's trying to get her off of this crazy trip and come back to reality. And I think you could have had some fun with that. But that's kind of the direction I'm going with my. If you think we need one more,
no.
So,
I like it.
Fair is fair.
Very cool,
guys. Let's talk about some of our favorite things that were happening in this movie. And one of those things that we always love to talk about is the vehicles of the film. We've got a few fun ones here, Kevin. If you wouldn't mind bringing those up, because we have the 1981 Volkswagen sedan, one of the all-time greats in this. And Adam, you gotta love that custom paint job.
You got it. The fact that you can pick that one up with two hands and turn it around yourself.
Yeah, the fast or not so furious mode of transportation definitely qualifies. I love this kind of custom Volkswagen Bug camouflage that Corky provided to our adventurers here. Very, very unique looking car.
Yeah. But truthfully, come on, I think the next vehicle is the vehicle of this film, and that is, of course, the custom-made Sandrail Dune Buggy.
Yeah, the general rides in style. Check out that Dune Buggy. I love that.
So cool.
We also have the 1951 Plymouth Cranbrook. This was the taxi that they do when they came into town. I love these older cars that they use in these films during this time because they're still running, they're still around, and you see a lot of them as taxi cabs.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, some fun vehicles in this. Of course, they go through a few Jeeps in this movie as well. So. But up next, guys, the best fight scene. Having the Lethal Mullet here, we got to have him tackle it. What is your favorite fight scene in this movie?
Oh, it's without a doubt the pub. It's as simple as that. It's such a comedic scene, but it's really showing, Chuck in his element. He's still obviously showing off his martial artistry, but it's done in a different light. We're usually seeing the seriousness of violence. I mean, and it is serious at its heart. But it also can be slapstick like Looney Tunes, and look at him go. He's in his element here, and that's the Spaceballs version, the Mel Brooks version of his style of karate.
What about you, Mr. Reitzel? Favorite fight scene?
Yeah, those are pretty much the ones like that one, and then you have the one at the end in the, I guess you call it the sacrifice throne room, and the picture that we have here is Chuck Norris doing his wonderful round kick at Sonny Landham, because it seems like Sonny Landham's go-to move as the El Coyote is picking someone up with his strength and just slowly pressing their face up against a wall. He does that several times in this movie. So yeah, and so I like the roundhouse kick that he does to kick him back on that one. That was good.
Lacey, what about you?
Okay, the fact that in every fight scene where there's a roundhouse kick, they cut to a wide shot and at a different angle so they can see Chuck Norris stop, turn, get into position, and then turn around. It's just, which is how they did it back then. I get it. But it's just so funny to watch now. I mean, back then it was like, dude, did you see that? When I was 14, 15, I was like, oh, that's awesome. But now you look at it and it's so fun the way they used to choreograph stuff. It really does kind of take you back, because they don't choreograph it like this anymore. Like they don't have to, they want it to look as real as as fluid as possible. And back then it was like spotlighting the specific kicks. And I think that's just awesome.
Okay, guys, up next, and Adam, I know you got to leave here shortly, but we got to get you in on this category. It's our You Took Him Out with what? Favorite weapon or inanimate object used as a weapon, or as Kevin's likes to say, guns, guns, guns.
Don't, Kev, you got to say it.
Yeah, Kevin.
Guns, guns, guns. Everybody's got guns.
Okay, Adam, before we let you get out of here, because we know that the demand for the mullet is high. You got to talk about some of your favorite weapons, or what was your favorite use of something as a weapon in this film?
Well, you can't go past the 1911, the 45 ACP. That is one of the classics still to this day, made by John Browning for, of course, the Colt Arms Company. Fantastic one that still delivers with a punch. And it was always in the 80s. There was something that was always there. And, of course, the classic 9mm Uzi in its original wood stock. Yes, folks, they had a wood stock on the original ones before the collapsible ones. But the Uzi was pretty much a mainstay for a lot of 1980s movies. And it was largely thanks to Chuck using various versions of them. Obviously, the micro Uzi was used in, what was it? It was
Invasion USA.
Invasion USA. And then later, they used the mini Uzi, which was sort of a slightly bigger one in Delta Force, which was used in by the Delta teams. And then, of course, we see it all over the place. The Uzi was one that kept coming back, and you didn't see it for a while until it was used again in Dark Knight Rises, used by one of the Talia al Ghul's henchmen. So it's a classic, and obviously it's a mainstay as a weapon for the Israeli Defense Force back in the day as well. But in this too, you've got revolvers too. No doubt a Smith & Wesson, probably 44 caliber or 38 special. This was classic, and again, to this day, it's one of those ones that just will always work under most conditions as well too. Before the advent of automatic pistols being a lot more out there, and of course made of porcelain thanks to the Glock company.
Well, we'll get to everybody else's thoughts on the weapons here in just a minute. But Adam, I know you need to go. But we got to give you a little hype and a little love here, because we got to talk about the Lethal Mullet Podcast here on the Fandom Podcast Network, where you're covering all those great action films, especially the one from the 80s. And we know that you had Firewalker coming up and planned for the Lethal Mullet, and you're going to talk about it in your own style, which is mullet style. And guys, if you've enjoyed this Couch Potato Theater, but you want a totally different view of Firewalker, be sure to check out, because we're going to cross this over. These are going to probably come out in the same week, guys, because we're going to really give you some Firewalker love here. But nobody does it like the mullet. And you know what? Tell people where they can find you on the interwebs and on all the social media, my friend.
Well, I believe you can catch us on this little show, or channel, I should say, called the Fandom Podcast Network. That's fbnet.podbean.com. You can catch us also you'll see it on the screen here. There it is. It's right there at The Lethal Mullet. Oh, look, I can even put it together. At The Lethal Mullet, and that's on all the socials. A little bit of an update. So we've had a couple of great shows out. We've had Southern Comfort recently out, which is more a thriller than it is an action film, and the cast in that are all onto great things. Powers Booth, obviously Keith Carradine, and you also have Fred Ward, who just happened to do a movie around about the same time as this, which we've covered before. Can you guess what it is? It's based on the Destroyer novels. There you go. There's a bit of a clue. And one of the
Remo Williams.
That's it. You got it. So we've got that coming. Obviously, got Warrior, which Warriors, or The Warriors, I should say, come out to play. Yes, that's coming. We've got some great early stuff coming as well. Now, what I can tell you is something I haven't mentioned yet, because it is just being fresh off the books with, of course, Mr. Morris himself. We are going to be smashing out some Lethal Hammer. And we're going to be covering things like this bad boy, like the Legends of the Wolf, of the great Space Wolves of Fenris, the Fenrisian Hunters, the Volker Fenris, and, of course, Lehman Russ's children, might I say. And more on that, of course, because we've got some big news about Warhammer. They finally set an an era for Henry Cavill's now production series going out to production very, very soon with its star is not actually Henry Cavill. Guess who it is, folks? It's going to freak you out because it was also a bit of a mission impossible to find out who they were going to put in there. Yes, I can tell you right now here, it's Tom Cruise.
Wow.
Believe it or not, Amazon's put a pitch up to Tom Cruise with Henry behind him. And, of course, he's a friend of Henry's, gives him a cake every Christmas for that. Of course, a chocolate cake, apparently, a very scrumptious one from what I hear. And he said, yes, I'll be very interested in that. My hot tip is, from most sources, this is going to be an Ultramarines show because they're the poster child for, of course, Warhammer 40K. And this will be based around their Primarch, Rabuk Guilliman, and most likely to be played by Tom Cruise. That's right. The McCrag boys from McCrag of Ultramar will be the poster child. And then, of course, we'll start all the other chapters. There's a lot of chapters out there of Space Marines. That more on, of course, the Lethal Mullet. And you'll catch me there.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, and we look forward to all the great stuff you got working with Lethal Mullet.
Thank you, Adam.
So, we appreciate you, and hopefully we'll have you back for some more Canon Film Retrospective.
That's right. And, of course, check out my Firewalker episode because I do believe Lacey right here is going to be joining me on that one too. We're going to have a lot of fun. It's going to be great.
Right on.
Well, thank you so much, Adam. We will see you soon and see you around the Fandom Podcast Network.
Sounds good.
See you, buddy.
Catch you next time. Bye.
Okay, guys. We got the mullets take on the weapons, Kevin. We need your gun love.
Well, Adam said it best regarding Uzis. You can't have an 80s action film without Uzis, and I'm glad we got that. And I did, by the way, I did throw a picture, and I just want to mention, I love the snake that was used in this ritual, not necessarily used as a direct weapon, but maybe for black magic-y type stuff. Why not throw the snake in there, right? I mean, he's kind of doing his little chants and stuff like that, and in a way it was used as a weapon, but my favorite weapon in the film is the gold knife, and I'm going to touch on that a little bit later.
Kevin, I have just one question for you. Why does it always have to be snakes?
Right?
Okay, guys, moving on to this movie. It definitely qualifies. The Sean Bean Award, Best Death Scene. Lacey?
I would like to say that I like a good breakaway chair as a weapon. Just
Oh, there you go.
There you
From
go.
the bar scene, right?
Yep.
Exactly. This movie has some very fun, interesting death scenes. It's Canon Films. You're always going to have that. So, guys, best death scene in this film.
Lacey, you go first. You go ahead.
I don't know. Everybody was kind of dispatched relatively quickly. It kind of seemed like the final little, just random, bang, kind of had reminiscent of the marketplace fight with Indiana Jones.
Indiana Jones, yes.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like Cyclops. Maybe Cyclops taking it. That was probably my. Maybe it was just the most satisfying death, and maybe not the most interesting, but I think that's the most satisfying.
The picture that we have here isn't the death scene, but it's more of a promotional picture scene.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm with Lacey here. The woman, Sunny Landham, finally dies, and then she pours that dust on his body while the knife is still in his back, if I remember correctly. And then he catches on fire. That's a pretty good death scene. The other one I thought was funny too is when they confront that one other villain. I think he was a coyote as well, and he's got the knife. He's holding Chuck Norris is holding the knife, threatening, drop your knife, and he sees the knife, and then he just jumps off the cliff, and he's like, I just told him to drop his knife.
Come on, guys. The best death scene is the about 30 ricochet bullet taking out one of the Mayan
Yes.
in the cave. It's our last bullet.
Yeah, it's like ricocheting for 20 seconds or something. It's very funny.
Yeah, that was a great one. But also too, guys, we always like to ask. Oh,
sorry, go ahead, Kyle.
if you are in a non-speaking extra on set, what scene do you want to be in? Lacey, you always come up with some of the fun answers for this one.
You know what? This is one of those ones where I'm just going to go with absolutely not. It's the jungle. It's hot. It's 85 degrees. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. No, I'm going to be at home in the United States with an air-conditioned fan and everything else, a nice little glass of lemonade. No, I do not want to be in the jungle watching anybody do anything.
Mr. Reitzel?
I'd want to be in the bar scene with the breakaway chairs and tables. I'd be one of the extras up in the back. That's indoors. It's not out in the jungle. So, I'd want to be like one of the surly looking characters. Or at that age, if I had to play my age at that time, I would be one of the scrappy little street boys. I'd be hanging out, doing something there. So, yeah.
Right on.
Oh, guys, this is easy. I want to be a patron in the restaurant at the end of the film. That is a high-class restaurant. They're going to have fans and cooling and all things going on. And you just get to hang in that really cool-looking environment. And, Melly Anderson's looking good there. You got Chuck and Louis Gossett just hanging out, having some champagne. You can probably walk up to them, have an interesting conversation with them, as long as you do it before the bartender gets involved. But, no, that's where you're going to be. It's just right there living the high life. But guys, too, we always gonna say if you're an extra on there and you're friends with the prop master, they say you can take one thing home from the set. What prop are you taking? Kevin, I'm gonna let you kind of go first here because I think I know where direction you're going in.
I am taking that knife out of Sonny Landham's dead corpse and keeping that and trying to make the the handle jewel glow somehow. That is just a classic prop look to it. And it's also in several of the posters. I love that knife. My second choice would be one of the clergy outfits that one of the cast was wearing. Those would be great to have.
Yeah, those would be good. What about you, Lacey?
I'm taking the eye patch.
I love it. So, are you taking it from Sonny directly, or are you waiting till he takes it off and leaves it on a table somewhere?
He'll never see me coming. One kick to the nerds, and I'm out the door.
I think the knife is the number one answer for this movie. I think it's that. I would say that copy of Cyforce that Sonny Landham was reading, but it was pretty beat up. It's probably not have too much value left in it.
No, wait, hold on. No one's choosing the VW camo bug. Come on.
Last time I tried to pick a car, you told me I couldn't have the car because it's not a prop.
This is true. I threw it in there.
And come on. Do you know how hard it is to dry out the shag carpeting that's in that VW bug?
It's true. Yeah.
No, to me, it's got to be the knife. There's not even a question about it here, guys. That's the prop from this movie. But now I think this one's going to be very interesting because we got our Vanilla Ice Cool as Ice award to the most dated thing or person in this movie. There's a lot of things here, guys. Kevin, I know this is one of your favorite categories, so hit me with it.
I was kind of struggling with this because you could look at the props, like the weapons, the cars, but it's because it's like an adventure movie set out in an adventurous type of thing. In a way, it's kind of not dated, but because it's a canon film and you can see where like the budget cuts were done, that kind of dates itself.
Yeah, I would agree. Lacey?
Well, if you figure that in 1986, okay, this was, let's see, Chuck Norris was born in 1940, right? And when was Melanie Anderson born? 1955. So I'd say the most dated thing about this is the relationship between the 15-year younger woman and the main character.
Which was definitely a trope that still happens.
It is, but
Yeah.
Guys, this was easy. Come on now.
It's not a quiz.
It's any camera Melanie Anderson used in this movie. Is that
true? Yeah.
Also, those shorts that she wears. the shorts that she wears that are already too short and they're also folded an inch at the bottom.
What's funny though, Kyle, about the camera is that little thin 110 millimeter camera that she has was my go-to camera when I first started like carrying my own camera around, because you could put it in your pocket, bag, purse, whatever. It was the smallest of cameras and it had the smallest cartridge, and it was an easy, like, you take a picture, and some of them had flashes, like built-in flashes that, would work well. And that was my go-to camera. So, and it's one of my favorite cameras from like the days of 80s.
Yeah.
Mine had a flash cube. You'd have to buy
the flash. Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, guys. And then, of course, we have to ask the big question here, too. Is this the Titanic I'm King of the World career moment? Was this the King of the World for anybody? I'm leaning towards no. I think it's a fun movie, but nobody had, in my opinion, a King of the World moment.
Well, maybe the Canon films, like it said that this is one of their films that made the most money. They're still not as good as some of the other Chuck Norris, Chuck Norris's other films, but I think that this was definitely kind of top tier for Canon.
I would bounce off on that and agree, because Canon was in its prime at this time and was just cranking out films, and the producers were making money like hand over fist. Basically, they were making a lot of money off this, and also purposely doing these on lower budget, because remember, American Ninja did great, but American Ninja 2, they like slashed the budget, and then it still did all right, So, and an earlier mention too, Perrier water. Perrier was very popular during the 80s. It was obviously showcased in this film, and then of course Spaceballs had fun with it with Perrier. When you look at Chuck Norris, though, I mean, when did he hit his peak? Was it around this time, or was it?
I think it was a little bit earlier. I think it was a little bit earlier for Chuck. And I think he's had a couple of apexes. I think.
What about Walker, Texas Ranger?
Well, that's what I'm gonna say. I think movie wise, it was the Invasion USA films.
Okay.
Around that time, but I think Walker was another apex for him as far as television and really becoming the icon that he's become now.
You could also say these type of Indiana Jones ripoff films were also having a King of the World moment too.
Right on. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Well, come on, we all know Chuck Norris's apex mountain is dodgeball.
F you, Chuck Norris.
Okay, guys, I also gotta give you a chance. The aliens nuke it from orbit hot take. Has anybody got a hot take for Firewalker?
Lacey should, because this is her pick.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I think that this is in part of one of those articles that I was reading, but I absolutely agree with the article that where I saw it said it said something to the effect of I would have preferred a couple of sequels to this rather than like Delta Force 4 or whatever. I think that this would have been a fun serial to watch, and I don't necessarily think that it's better. They'd be better or worse than another film, but I do think that there could have been some really fun sequels to this.
Well, funny you should say that, Lacey, because that's our next final question.
Mm-hmm.
Is what happens next?
And that is Kevin.
Yeah, what happens next? The next day? Should there have been a sequel or a reboot? I'm kind of feeling a sequel, Lacey. Since you brought it up, what would you have liked to have seen from a sequel for, Firewalker 2?
Well, let's face it. The very last thing you see in the last scene is the general. No, not the general. What's the first? Yeah, the general. The first guy.
General.
Yeah. Up in the thing saying, "Oh, we meet again," or whatever. And so the idea that it's entirely possible that because she is psychic, and in that part of the world, that could mean she is more valuable as a human. I think that she gets kidnapped within 10 minutes of this. She gets kidnapped. he takes her to some place to like try and mine her brain for, whatever, he wants to know about the thing, whatever his thing is. And they have to go and go after her. And now I would like to say, I think that she can kick a little ass on her own. I don't think this is a damsel in distress situation. I think this is a let's go help where we can, and like at least provide her with a getaway car. I don't necessarily think it needs to be like, oh no, I don't know what to do, I can't help. That's not necessary. But there could have been half a dozen of these, and I think they would have been really fun because they are made on such short, like it almost feels like they could have done a Young Indiana Jones TV show where they take, 2 hour long adventures and make them a movie and release one of those every couple of 3 weeks. I think this could have been one of those.
Interesting. Kevin.
Yeah, I agree. I like the idea of, because at the end of the film, they've used their wealth to some degree that we know of. And I kind of get the feeling that we're getting a National Treasure Nick Cage type of situation.
Nice.
Where they actually have wealth from their first adventure, and they use that wealth to either, like, you say maybe Melody her character becomes very valuable for some other reason. Now, I'm keeping in mind of the canon limits of their budget. I would like to maybe have them taken to like maybe Egypt or, Paris or something like that. Yeah. It would have been really fun to kind of see her being kidnapped for a particular reason over on a different continent somewhere. That might have been fun. Lacey, you wanted to say something. Go.
Yeah, or what if one of the pieces of the treasure leads them on another treasure hunt?
There you go. Perfect. Yeah.
Pieces in there where what if they're like Warehouse 13, where they're trying to catalog everything, and every time they turn around, they're finding another thing that's got another. Well, we got to figure out what this is, and then that sends them down a rabbit hole.
It would have been interesting too, going along with what you just said, is they find something in there that's valuable, but it doesn't fit. Like it shouldn't have been there in the first place. Like someone else had been here, obviously after. Maybe or something, and hid something there, expecting to return to retrieve it, and maybe that's into the story as well. There's so many possibilities you could have done with this trio because the chemistry is so much fun when you rewatch this film. What do you think, Kyle?
I think if they could have done a sequel, they would have. I think because this didn't make the money like a normal Chuck Norris film, they kind of shied away from it. Plus, I don't necessarily know if Lou would have come back. I think he would have come back to work with Chuck, but I don't know about working within the canon films world again for Lou, because let's face it, he went on Iron Eagle shortly after this, and that became a whole new thing for him.
Actually, hold on. Iron Eagle came out earlier. It came out in, I think, it came out like in January or February of '86, because then Top Gun comes out. Because a lot of people don't realize Iron Eagle actually came out first. And then, and then this came out later. So he's having a good year. Maybe he's on top of the world right now.
Maybe he buys the rights to this and does them the way he wants to. Maybe he comes back and maybe he buys the rights to it and goes a little bit bigger budget. We don't know.
Yeah.
I think the thing for me with this is that you don't even have to tie necessarily anything into this movie other than, like, let's say you clear up the cliffhanger from this one. I think the biggest thing is that these guys can't get the adventure out of their blood.
Yeah.
So when the next thing comes up that they have an opportunity as, they can't get it out of their blood, so they go on the next thing. Mm-hmm. I think if you were going to do it now, it would probably make a great Netflix type series where you can do like a 6-part thing where like each week is a different adventure, or something where it literally picks off, like they become like legitimate like businessman treasure hunters. And maybe there's a rival treasure hunter they're working against or something like that for some of the episodes as well. You could have some real fun with it. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of different ways they could go with this. But yeah. I want to thank everybody for joining us for this Couch Potato Theater as we continue our Canon Films retrospective and covering Firewalker. It's been a lot of fun talking with everybody about this. But let's get into our final thoughts, guys. Firewalker, Lacey, was your pick. I want to get your final thoughts on Firewalker.
It was fun to watch back in the day. I mean, like I said, I murdered several VHS copies. I think it's one of those ones that it still holds up because there's nothing I mean, it's definitely of its time, but there's nothing overtly aggressive or offensive. And that's something that you can't say about a lot of 80s movies. Like, there's nothing.
Especially canon films.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, I think that this is one that you can still watch. I mean, I don't know if someone, Kevin, you said you watched it for the first time fairly recently.
Yep.
So for you, was it still like the solid action? Am I just like buying into the nostalgia of it all? Because I think it still holds up.
I agree. It does. Because when I watched it the first time, I knew what I was getting into. I knew it was a canon film. Mm-hmm. I knew it was an Indiana Jones, knockoff, so to speak, or maybe a tribute to it, whatever you want to call it, an homage. And so I was also pleasantly surprised just how charming that Chuck Norris was out of his normal, like, gruff and one-man army type of situation. So it definitely filled that adventurous spirit in this type of film genre that I wanted to see, and it did not disappoint.
I'm just super stoked that out of all four of us, I'm the only one that saw this in the movie theater. Like, what? How did that happen?
Well, as for me with this film, I think this is a great example of a canon film. I think it's why it's part of this retrospective. This movie has its ups and downs, but you go in with it knowing what it is, and I think that's the big thing. But what makes this movie timeless is the chemistry of Chuck Norris, Louis Gossett, and Melanie Anderson. They are a phenomenal team in this. You have so much fun with their characters, and that's what makes this movie be timeless. Because if they don't have that chemistry, this movie just falls to the wayside. And I truly believe that. It's seeing Chuck in that different kind of role. It's seeing everything that's happening between them and that chemistry. And I think that's why this movie is revisitable. It's something you can revisit and enjoy. You just know what you're getting. Like any other canon film, you know what you're getting. So if you're expecting the top-notch effects, all the top-notch of everything, you're in the wrong podcast, buddy. But no, it's just been a fun ride to revisit this film. It had been a while since I'd seen it, so it was great to revisit it. So, guys, that's going to wrap things up here. Again, thank you so much for joining us for our Couch Potato Theater Canon Films retrospective. Lacey, thank you so much for suggesting this film as part of the retrospective. And like I said, coming up, we will be covering Cobra. We are going to cover Masters of the Universe. I think we're going to try to do something a little special with Masters of the Universe. We'll keep you in the loop on that. We are going to talk about the movie that brought us the muscles from Brussels, Bloodsport, and of course, as I said at the top of the show, maybe Kevin's all-time favorite Chuck Norris film, Invasion USA. And of course, this is the Fandom Podcast Network. You can find us all over social media, including Blue Sky at FanPod Network. Guys, we are everywhere. Find us on Facebook, find us on Twitter, find us on Instagram. We're all over the place. Kevin, where can people find you on social media?
You can find me on all of the socials at Spartan_Phoenix, including Blue Sky, which is Spartan Phoenix. Of course, you can find me on Facebook, Kevin Reitzel, and all over the Fandom Podcast Network.
And Lacey, I know you're not much on the socials, but I believe people can find you on maybe a little Letterboxd action or some Discord, maybe even.
Yes, I am on the Letterboxd and I am on the Discord. Woohoo!
At Lacey Pants.
At Lacey Pants, that's me. And I will be on the Lethal Mullet in a couple of weeks, and I'll be on several more of these in a couple of weeks. So yeah, I'm mostly on the network.
Yeah, we're not letting her go anywhere. Don't worry, guys. As for me, you can find me on Twitter at AKyleW. You can also find me on Instagram at Threads at AKyleFandom. You can find me on Blue Sky at AKyleW. And of course, too, we love to hype up our gear. We're proud of it. tpublic.com. Look up the Fandom Podcast Network or the listings of any of your favorite shows. You see our Couch Potato shirt on there. Kevin sporting the Fandom Podcast Network hoodie because it's a little cold in Australia right now, apparently. Yeah, you're all backwards back over there, Kevin.
Yeah, it's your summer, our winter in Australia right now. So yeah,
and yet you're in the future. So I'm all confused right now. And of course, all the great gear, whether it's Couch Potato Theater, Union Fed Type 40, Blood of Kings, Lethal Mullet,
Lethal Mullet. Yeah, get your Lethal Mullet shirt.
Love that Lethal Mullet logo. Of course, we do not only shirts but cups, mugs, bags, laptop cases, pillows, tapestries. It's all over the place. Just go to tpublic.com. But guys, I want to thank you all so much for joining me on this treasure hunt. A special thank you to Adam O'Brien, the Lethal Mullet himself, for joining us on this.
Yes,
it's not a Canon Films retrospective without him. And the next time we come back, Kevin, we'll be cutting pizza with scissors, correct?
This is true.
Next up in the Canon Films retrospective is Cobra, but we want to thank you for joining us and listening to us either on our YouTube channel or on any of the great places where you can catch your podcast. This has been Couch Potato Theater Firewalker, and until next time, we will see you on the couch. Good night, everybody.